Hello everyone, my name is Moses. I specialize in Python programming language, cybersecurity, and software development. Python is one of the most powerful languages out there, and today we are going to build the absolute, non-negotiable foundation. We are covering the 5 concepts that every single piece of Python program has, and this include comments, identifiers, variables, data types, and typecasting. So these are the early stage building blocks of any programming language. And in this case, we're talking about Python. You can think of it like learning the alphabets, grammar, and basic rules of conversation. Before you write a novel, you have to master the alphabet first so that you can unlock the language itself. So if you're ready to move from curiosity to capability, to finally understand the how behind the what, you're exactly where you need to be. Stick with me. I'll break it all down step by step with zero assumption. I will not think of the fact that maybe you have prior knowledge of programming. I'll take this as simple as possible so that everyone can understand what is happening. And if you want to follow this journey from absolute beginner to confident builder, make sure you subscribe. We are going to take these basic bricks and start building real projects together very soon. So after we do the fundamentals, we are going to start building projects. In Django, Web Application Development Framework is one of the things we are going to build once we are done with fundamentals. So I'm taking you from the beginning to the end. So stick with me, subscribe, and see you to the finish line. We're going to look at this part. This is the introductory part of Python. So we have comments, identifiers, variables, data types, and typecasting. These are some of the building blocks of a language. And most of these tutorials will find out there, they don't break this down well enough as I would like to, because I've looked at several tutorials out there. They just brush over these things, assuming that you'll understand. But what I want to talk about today, I want to make it as simple as possible so that any person coming into Python programming language can understand what is happening. Let's begin with comments. So I have a file here. It's a txt file. The purpose of this txt file is to assist you so that you have something to write down and go over during your free time. So we have what is called a comment. So what is this? Comment basically, as the text say, it describes what the program is all about. Comments are not executed. They are skipped by the Python interpreter. They are used to explain what the program is all about, but they themselves, they don't get executed. So whenever you include a comment in your program, it is to aid any other person coming to review the code to know exactly what the statements are supposed to do. But overall, they don't get executed. So Python has two types of comments. We have a single line comment. So this type of comment, every line of, it can be a sentence or a program statement, must start with hashtag in front of it in order for that line to be treated as a comment. It must start with hashtag, as you can see these two examples. So hashtag depicts this is a single line comment. Another thing you need to realize is that whenever interpreter encounters hashtag in front of a line, that line will be skipped automatically. As you can see in this example, I want to demonstrate. So let me create a file. I have already a file here called comment. I've written some things inside. Let me just start afresh to it. So Let's write a simple program called the display hello world. So this is a simple Python statement. It displays hello world when you run the program. Let me come back to my terminal, cmd. So I'll clear the screen with CLS. Now, I know where I'm going. So this is the desktop. Clear the screen, list everything. I want to go to Python fundamentals. Clear the screen. Want to come to introduction. Clear the screen and list everything. So the file I want is here. It is called comments.py. Now, when I run this program, so let's say I say Python space comments.py. You'll see I'm getting something. And this is a text, hello world. Now, let me apply single line comment on the text, because we said the moment you put single line comment on a statement, on a program statement, or a line or a sentence, that line will be converted to a comment. So you can see already it has changed the color. So what will happen? You'll find that this program line, this statement will not be nothing will be displayed, it will be skipped. So that tells you that the moment you add hashtag in front of a program statement, that statement is skipped automatically. So for example, when I return back and write next line to it, test pass, then I return back, I run the program, this time I'll get test pass being displayed. So that means the first line was ignored. So this is single line comment. Next category we want to look at, it is multi-line comment. So we said comments are categorized into two, single line and multi-line comment. Multi-line comment is further categorized into two subcategories. We have triple single quote and triple double quote. So what are the use cases of these multi-line comments? They're used to write documentation inside a program or explain the overall look of your program. So if your program does a specific task, multi-line comment will be used to explain the overall functionality of your program, as opposed to single line comment, which explain a single line of code statement. So for example, I can come here, maybe let's say I want to explain this part. I can say this is a statement. Now, second part, we have multi-line comment categorized into two, triple single quote and triple double quote. So let me begin with the triple single quotes. So this is how you write them. So anything that comes in between this is a single triple quotes. Triple quotes. So anything that comes in between here, it will be ignored by the compiler. Now in this case, we're talking about interpreter. It will ignore that line. So for example, when I run the program, you will see test pass being displayed, but the text that is surrounded with single triple quotes is ignored. So that tells you that it can be used generally to explain a program holistically, but they themselves, whatever is inside there, is not executed. So the second subcategory, you have triple double quote. So anything coming in between there says triple double quote. So you can write a paragraph of text and it will be ignored automatically by the interpreter. So when I save, come and run the program again, I get test, pass, the only first line we had that was not commented. It's the only thing that's get executed. So the rest are treated as comments and they are ignored automatically. So that's the first part. Comments are very crucial in a program. Always include them. Even when you're writing a simple line, 1 or 3 or 4 lines, just add comments inside there. They help you to understand the fundamentals way easier as opposed to not including them. So as one of my suggestions, and advice, always use comments in your program. Very good practice. Next, we have identifier. So what is an identifier? Just come down here. So what is an identifier? Identifier is a name that you guess or you derive that is used in naming concepts in Python programming language. So these names, they're not that special. You just have to come up with them out of thin air. For example, you can just think of any topic, let's say, or area, let's say academics. You can think of a word like results, a word like total, a word like average, a word like marks. All those falls under the category of identifiers. And as you can see, I've just derived them. So these are names you can just guess. But as much as you're guessing these names or deriving, you have to follow certain set of rules set by the Python programming language. Generally, these rules are in all programming languages, not necessarily being Python only. So the first rule, identifier can be a combination of letters A to Z, that is lowercase, uppercase, A to Z, digits 0 to 9, or underscore. When you combine all that, you can create a simple identifier. And when you think about it, you can create even 1 billion identifiers out of that. Just first rule only. But we have also exceptions to this first rule. And exception number 1 is that so exception number 1, an identifier can't start with a digit. But this digit, you can add it anywhere in the program. You cannot begin with a digit. For example, I have cited here some few simple examples here. So we have total. It has started with a digit. This is invalid. The correct way, you could have said results 9 or total 9. This is a valid identifier. This one is invalid identifier. Second exception. Supposing you want to have an identifier that has 2 words. So in this case, you have to put space underscore in that space between the 2 words. Put underscore between them or join the 2 words together to form 1 word. Because one thing you need to understand is that spaces between 2 words is not allowed in Python programming language. In the case of the identifier creation, you cannot put spaces between 2 words. For example, let's say total space marks. This is not a valid identifier. Why? Because there is no underscore between them. Spaces is not allowed between 2 words, supposing you want to use 2 words. So one way of solving this is to put underscore between them, or you join the words together. Come You can either join the words, together, or use underscore between them. Next, rule. Special symbols are not allowed in an identifier. What are these special symbols? Things like $sign, exclamation marks, a hashtag, $sign, a percent. All those, you cannot use them when creating an identifier. You will create an invalid identifier. Next, identifier can be of any length. This is true in the case that you can have an identifier which is just one letter only. You can have one letter as an identifier, or 2 words, or 3 words. So identifier can be of any length. A, total marks. Next, and the final rule, keywords cannot be used as an identifier individually. So what are these keywords? Keywords are words with special meaning in Python programming language. You can think of it like copyright. So in business arena, in the case that any business has a brand name or a logo, you cannot use that logo in your own business. So you'll have to replicate the logo but add something on top of it. So that is the same thing with keywords. These are words with special meaning, but you can use them by adding something to it. For example, I can say I want to use print function. I can add underscore, then I say results. So print itself is a keyword, but the fact that I added results with underscore between them, it ceases to be a keyword because I've added something to it to change the meaning totally. So you can use that way, but in the normal circumstance, it's not good to use the keywords, even the fact that even though you are joining them with other words. So those are the rules for creating identifiers. So when you think about it, you can create 10 identifiers of your choice. So you can take this as an exercise. Create 10 identifiers of your choice. Down here. So take this as a challenge. Create 10 identifiers of your choice following those rules I've mentioned above. And then you can tell me, or you can send me the outcomes or the identifiers you've created. Next, we have variable. So what's a variable? A variable, when you just look at it without even having prior knowledge about it, variable is something that changes. So when we bring it now to Python programming, a variable is an address for memory location. So it is this memory, what is stored in this memory location that will be changing. The address itself will not change. It is what is stored in the memory location that will change. In the case for Python. So let's go and look at variables. So as I said, they are name placeholders to hold any type of data which the programmer can use to assign and modify during the course of execution. So underline the word modify. As I said earlier, variables are addresses for memory location. They themselves, they don't change. The addresses don't change. It is the value stored in those locations that changes. And one thing you need to realize about Python, variables are not explicitly defined as opposed to languages like C and C++. This sometimes comes as a challenge for those people coming from languages like C and C++. You don't define or declare variables manually or explicitly in Python programming language. The value you supply will determine the data type of the storage. because it is in that storage area that you supply the value. So if the value is integer, you will say we have an integer value stored there. So examples I have here, for example, in C programming language, this is how you declare a variable. But after declaring a variable like this, it is then you assign a value to it. So this 100 already comes to a location that has been defined as integer. So that location is reserved for integer values. As opposed to Python, the value you supply will determine the space reserved. Okay, so let's continue. So how do we define or declare a variable in Python? So one thing you need to realize about a variable, it comprises of three parts. First part, we have the valid identifier. You create following the rules for naming identifiers. Second, you need to have what is called assignment operator, and in this case, it is equal sign. And final thing you need is the value. Value is the letter or number that can be changed. That's a value. And now when we look at it, this is an example of a variable. So whenever you assign a value using assignment operator, you're converting that identifier to become an address for memory location, which is also called a variable. So let's continue. So that process of assigning 100 to total, it's called variable assignment. Case in point, let me create a simple file here. I can just wipe this information here. Let me just start a clean file. So let's say, for example, you have a valid identifier because we said in order to create a variable, you must start with a valid identifier. So let's say my valid identifier is total all or result. Result it's not recognized in Python interpreter. It is meaningless as of now. So it has to be converted to a memory address so that it can be useful. For example, if I run this program like this with a valid identifier. So this one is a valid identifier right here. Let me put a comment. I say this is a valid identifier. This is a valid identifier. Valid identifier itself like this, it is meaningless in the case that when I run this program, I will get an error message. No, I'm running a different one. So this one is variable.py. You see I'm getting an error, and this error is saying the result is not defined. So why is it telling us that design is not defined? The reason why it is telling us result is not defined, it's because it is not yet an address for memory location. So how do we convert it to become an address? By using an assignment operator in front of it. And by the way, if you don't want to store any value, you use none. None is used to means absence of a value. So if you have a variable and you don't want to assign anything to it, you assign none. So when I put assignment operator with none, and then I run this program this time, I will get nothing displayed. So the lack of displaying something does not mean that the program failed. Just means I did not display anything to the command prompt. So right here, you can come and say now, let's say I want to assign something to it. I'll say 100. I'll come and say print result. So this time when I run this program, I'll get 100 as the output. So that tells you that identifier is meaningless in Python, and the only time it becomes useful is when it's a variable. Now, when we're talking about variable, there are several ways you can assign a value to a variable. For example, you can assign a string value. What is a string value? A string value is a value. It's anything surrounded with the comment, with the speech marks, and most of the time it is sequence of letters. So, for example, I can say name equals to Moses. So as you can see, the name Moses is surrounded with quotes. So this make it a string value. So variable can store a string value. Again, variable, you can have multiple value in one line assigned to multiple variables on the other side. For example, x, y, and z. I can use to assign 10, 11, 12. So if I print this x, y, z, and then I run this program, you will see I'm able to get the results 10, 11, 12. So that tells you that there are several ways you can manipulate variables. Now, when we return to the variable, I think that is it about it. Now, before we close on it, we have something called a statement and a expression. So a statement is a single line of code that has a valid identifier, assignment operator, and a value or none. So we have an identifier, the assignment operator, and a value. This is a program statement. Now we have expression. Expression is combination of values with operator in between them that brings about a new value. So this operation here is called an expression that will result to a new value, which is 13. This is an expression. There's an expression. Now, that is all about variables. Next on the list, you have what is called data types. So what are data types? Data types are data storage format. And here is the list we have. We have numeric data types. We have string data types. For example, when you're talking about numeric data types, this include integer and float data types. So integer data, these are data or values which are whole number that don't have decimal places. And we have floats, these are decimal numbers. So that's the difference between integer and float. Float, they have decimals. Integer, they don't have decimal, they're whole numbers. For example, 100, 200, but in Python, we don't explicitly say this variable is an integer. For example, when you look something like this, there is no indication other than the value to say that what is here is an integer. So it is the value which indicates whether it is an integer, a float, or a string, as opposed to other languages where it is explicitly defined. Next category we have string. So this is used for text. They are written inside single quotes or double quotes or triple quotes. So we saw this when we were looking at comments. We saw double triple quotes. But let's look at file for data types. For example, when you look at this statement here, name Moses, this is a single quote string, and you also have Moses with double quotes. This is a double quotes, and these are single quotes. All these are string. We also have this description. We have double triple quotes. Then you have a statement inside here. It can be a paragraph. So when you run this program this way, you will get results. So Python data types. So you can see hello world, this is Moses. So that is it about data types. There is not much thing we can say about data types in Python. Other than this at the beginning. Of course, we have others. We have lists, we have tuples, we have all that. We'll look at them in subsequent videos we'll be creating. Next, we have typecasting. So what is typecasting? Typecasting basically, it is converting a value from one data type to another. Examples. We have two types of typecasting. We have implicit and explicit typecasting. So implicit typecasting, Python automatically converts the values itself. You don't have to do anything. It is the Python interpreter itself that converts the value from one data type to another. Case in point. Let's come here so you can see. We have 10.5 and 100. So 100 is an integer, 10.5 is a float. So when you print total, you'll find that what will be displayed, it is 110.5. So that means integer part was converted. This is typecasting. So you can see 110.5. The reason why you get that is because 100, which is an integer, was converted to a float, and then addition was performed. Now, we also have another category which is called explicit typecasting. So explicit typecasting, you do this manually. You take part in converting the data type of a value from one to another. For example, we have these functions here that does the heavy duty of converting the values from one data type to another. So we're going to look at them. We see how they work. So for example, we have integer. This will convert values to integer. Float. This converts values to integer. We have this float. This converts values to decimal figures. String converts value to string, to sequence of letters or characters. We have bool. Bool basically it represents Boolean values. We have Boolean values which are true or false. These are Boolean values. Actually true. So this one will either will convert values to Boolean equivalent, true or false. But we'll not look at Boolean values. So let me just remove it. Let's look at bool function. Let's talk about these three as of now. We'll talk about Boolean and all that later. So string converts values to a sequence of letters. Now let's write an example here. We see how this works. So I will use, so let's say we have a variable called result. I'll say y. And then we forget we assign 100 with quotes. So this makes this this value to be a string. Why? Because it is surrounded with quotes. Now we need to convert this value to become an integer. We will use int function in this case. So how? We will say integer equivalent. Let's say integer equals to. So it doesn't have to be integer data type or the variable there. We just come up with that name. So we'll say int y. Save the file. So I want to check to make sure. In fact, I can check even the first line here. I want to check this line to know if it is truly a string or not. So in order to check, we usually use a function called type function. That is the work of this function. This function is used to check the data type of value. How? We'll say print, or just wrap it inside print function as an argument. I'll say type, then y. So it will tell me the value stored in y is what type. It belongs to the class string. The value stored in y belongs to the class string, as you can see. So then we come and convert the value using int. So type, what it does, it checks the data type of values. So int will convert the value to integer. So I'll come and check again to ascertain actually it has been converted. Just say integer there, because whatever will be converted will be stored in this integer variable. So let me run the file. This time you can see it belongs to the class integer. So that tells you that int function converted the value, from string, to integer. And then type was used to check whether the value actually has been converted to the class of integer. So that is it about typecasting. We can go on and look at other groups of typecasting. We have float and string. So when we come to this, you can say, let's say, for example, r equals to 10. I can convert this to a floating point value. How? J equals to float r. I want to check the type of this value using type function. So type function checks the data type of the value in J, and print will display for us the data type. So you can see it belongs to the class float. So for the introductory part of it, that is it. So in our next video, we will be talking about operators in Python programming language. Operators are found in every program you can think of under programming language. So that is our next topic. So watch out, subscribe, comment to help us grow together. So that is it for the day. If you have any question, you can always comment. You can always say what is in your mind. So see you next time in my subsequent videos.